Hello everyone again. We are about to start our session in relation to learning outcome number 1 of Unit 8 research project of H&Z Program in Business. I am Roman Puchkov and I am delivering a video masterclass to complete your research journey. Learning outcome number 1 is to understand how to formulate a research specification. We are going to look into various ways, and it is a very early start for you at the very beginning of your research journey. Learning outcome number 1 is comprised of 5 important elements. First, we are going to look into how to formulate and record possible research project outline specifications. Second, we are going to look into the factors that contribute to the process of research to complete your project selection. Third element is to undertake critical review of the literature of the existing body of knowledge references in relation to your chosen topic. Then we are going to move on to the production of your research project specifications. And finally, we are going to compile an appropriate plan and procedures for the agreed research specification. Let's start. This is a structure of your research project report, your assignment, which you are to complete at the end of this course. You will see that it has practically around 7 important areas. We start with the introduction. You need to formulate aims and objectives of your research, how you're gonna select the topic, how you what's the rationale for you to select an appropriate topic of your choice. You need to carry out literature review, critique of references from primary sources, secondary sources, methodology to collect and analyze the data. Also, we'll be looking into scope and limitations, and also findings of your research, what you have actually achieved in terms of collecting and analyzing data, the results of your work, which will be followed by conclusions and recommendations. In terms of your plan, you will be expected to produce a comprehensive proposal, which will include the title of your project, some background information, again, aims of your research and the research question, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, what the methodology, the way you're going to address your question in terms of collecting and analyzing the data. The proposal will also include plan for implementation and some concluding remarks at the end of your proposal. They will go to the end of your proposal. When you prepare your research, most and first important thing, you need to be clear what the aim of your work is. What is the purpose of your study, the purpose of your investigation? It should be clearly and concisely defined. The aims can be relatively broad statements of desired outcomes. They are general intentions of your research. It's like painting a picture of your project. The aims should be supported by your research objectives. So these are the means how you're gonna achieve your aim. The objectives will be the steps, incremental process, step by step, yeah, how you're gonna and take to answer your research questions. You need to emphasize that how you are planning to accomplish the aims of your research, and must be highly focused, feasible, realistic, pretty much like you use the term smart objectives. They should also be in a form of individual statements to convey your intentions. Research questions are the specific problems that you want to investigate within your subject area. There could be more than one research question. You want to know and tell us in your assignment what specifically do you want to understand by doing this study, by doing this research. And we are using the term study and research interchangeably. We are researchers to investigate a particular phenomena, a particular research issue, problem, research question. The research questions would also be clear in terms of how you're gonna attempt to answer your research question and how they can be related to one and another. These are examples how you may wish to turn your research question in relation to your research objectives, how these two components are interrelated. One of the examples is the question which you're trying to address with your research is why have organizations introduced early retirement? The objective may well be formulated in the following form: to explore the effects of early retirement for the organization. That's what you're trying to achieve. The objective of your research in relation to this question is to explore the effects of the organizations introducing early retirements. There might be negative, positive effects, we don't know. That's what you are to try and investigate. Another example relates to, and I'll start with research objective here, to evaluate the consequences of early recruitment for employees. You may wish to formulate your research question as to what are the consequences of early recruitment schemes. And your objective will be subsequently relating to the consequences of early recruitment for labor force, for employees. More examples. Here is a research problem. Slow company sales growth. The company is experiencing extremely slow sales. Sales are not growing as much as Chief Executive Officer would like to be. What you're trying to achieve with your research is to investigate the potential to increase sales. You want to find out, is there any scope for the company to actually boost their sales? Another example may be relating to the following problem. How can company X increase sales? That's what you want to do in more narrowed format. You want now to help the company increase sales, company X. You may wish to formulate three objectives. Objective number 1, to analyze the trends in sales in company X. Objective number 2, to investigate the views of stakeholders. Objective number 3, to explore methods which are adopted by other companies to increase sales. Maybe you find out something interesting for your company X. And finally, perhaps you can have a supplementary objective to provide recommendations to Chief Executive Officer to improve sales. Let's move on to the next slide. The way how you're gonna formulate your research question objectives will very much depend on your thinking, on the flow of thought, how familiar you are with the topic, how familiar you are with the problems associated with that, what are the different pathways that you can set aside for you and follow. So brainstorming and even putting in a form of a snapshot, just writing down your ideas as shown in this slide may be very, very helpful. Never mind, this example is about climate change, something which you also may wish to investigate as long as you appropriately link it to business subject area, for example, about consumer behavior or human activities or any other aspect of this particular issue. We are now moving on to research methodology, which is another essential part of your research journey. You need to formulate not just the methods, how you're going to find out about that particular issue, that particular problem, methods to collect data, to collect your information, but it is more about how you're going to do it. We have research. Research can be primary or can be taken form of a secondary research. Primary research, in turn, may be qualitative and quantitative. When it comes to the secondary research, we are looking into secondary sources, both can be found in the literature, or you're looking into the context of a specific company, so-called case study. It is very important for us as researchers to think about these issues well in advance before you actually initiate your project. You really need to have a clear idea what approaches and techniques will you be using to collect and analyze your data to address your research question. How do these constitute an integrated research strategy of yours? I mentioned that your primary research can take form of either qualitative or quantitative. Let's have a look at quantitative research first, particularly if you really like numbers. Something which you could quantify in terms of the amount of number of something. Qualitative research derived from the word quality. It should not be just confused with the term quality of a product or service. It's really more about distinctive feature, a quality or characteristic of a particular development, particular phenomena. Both data are important, both types of these data are very important, and it's absolutely entirely up to you and your approach, how you're going to address your research question to use either of them. At H&D level, you may wish to go for either quantitative or qualitative research. You may wish also to combine both types of research together, but you will also be need to be mindful of the word limit, which is just 3,500 words in your final submission of your research project assignment. The choice of methods will certainly depend in terms of the approaches and techniques which you're going to use to collect and analyze your data. The techniques are pretty much different. The quantitative techniques will predominantly have to do with numbers. You need to use a big sample, probably more than 30 people to survey, for example, or to send out 30 questionnaires. It should be very much measurable so that you can quantify the data, and also at the same time that gives you an idea to be objective, not subjective. Preciseness, preciseness, I beg my pardon, will be a feature of your quantitative approach. Qualitative is not something which is more vague, but it will definitely have a feature of um, writing in narrative forms, so that you're looking really for opinions, for probably attitudes of people towards specific issues, and that will probably be based on you writing in Microsoft Word, as opposed to quantitative research, where you probably will have generated a lot of data using Excel. So in qualitative research, probably you are not going to use Excel. You would predominantly be using Microsoft Word. You can still use sample, but that will be relatively small, maybe like a focus group of, let's say, 5, 6 people. You would really need to look into the depth of meaning when we talk about attitudes, relationships, and so on and so forth. And qualitative research sometimes is treated as more subjective rather than objective, so that there is a high element of subjectivity in your approach. All right, let's move on to the types of data. I mentioned in my earlier slide the concept of primary data as opposed to secondary data. Let's look into a little bit more depth what the difference is. Primary data is something that you and only you, or probably other people who are working with you, collect for the purpose of finding answers to your own questions. For example, it is you who are going to go to a shopping mall in Stratford and distribute questionnaires and collect the data from the participants, from the customers in Westfield Shopping Centre. In business, we often talk about market research when we ask questions related to what customers might desire, what sort of products, for example, they want to see in the shop's shelves. It is just you who are able to find out this information. That will be primary data. In the service and production departments, managers often seek to measure performance of individuals. Staff appraisals, for example, which the companies are carrying out, is part of primary data. They collect information about how their employees are performing in relation to the company, which is doing these staff appraisals using key performance indicators to define, to measure performance of individuals. That will be primary data. At H&D level, you always are asked to carry out some sort of research. For example, on your unit business decision making, you have already been asked to carry out a survey among 30 potential respondents. Let's move on to the secondary data, which is the data which already been collected by someone else, something which has already existed somewhere and available. You may wish to use this data again and again. Internet sources literature, journals, books, articles. All these are examples of your secondary data which you might be using. There are stories in the newspapers, or anything which has already been produced, accumulated in a form of a body of knowledge, as we call it, using academic terms. That would be something which we call secondary data. Annual reports by the companies is a very good example. We are now moving on to types of your research. Essentially, there are three. You may wish to explore a particular development, particular phenomena, using inductive approach, or where little earlier work is already available, you probably look into making some assumptions, testing hypotheses, as we call it. It may be largely qualitative in nature and helps how things are going to move in future. The second type of your research can be descriptive. It's merely to describe a particular subject using observations or survey, descriptive statistics if you go for quantitative research. And the research questions would normally begin with what or how, to what extent, for example, motivation leads to increasing performance of employees, or how the company X can boost their growth sales. There is also another type of research which is called causal, learning why things happen in the way they do, so that you're looking into the cause and effect relationship and association between variables. Here are a couple of examples of business research. You have a vast subject area which is called human resource management or human resources. Within that area, you can narrow it down to a particular aspect of HR. For example, recruitment and selection, a particular problem or question within recruitment and selection. Staff retention or incentives, training and development. These are other narrow areas within your subject, within your topic. Same example with marketing. As a subject area, you narrow it down to buying habits, branding, advertising, social media, anything will do. Or for those of us who are familiar with finance and accounting, you want to look into forecasting, budgeting, risk management, and so on and so forth. Strategy is another example, so that you are investigating a research area in business strategy, but you really want to look into specific narrowed sub-area leading to growth, strategy of growth or change management. Now we are moving into methodology, and I would like to pay attention at this point as to the issue of sampling. In order to do that, we are going to look at a video which is available on YouTube, which will tell us a lot about what sampling means and how you can actually identify a type of sampling which suits your project needs. Let's try and watch this video. I hope it's gonna work well.
Simple, convenience, systematic, cluster, and stratified. To find things out about a population of interest, it is common practice to take a sample. A sample is a selection of objects or observations taken from the population of interest. For example, a population might be all apples in an orchard at a given time. We wish to know how big the apples are. We can't measure all of them, so we take a sample of some of them and measure them. The method chosen for taking the sample depends on the nature of the population and the resources available in terms of time and money. The ideal is for each object in the population to be equally likely to be chosen as part of the sample. This is called an unbiased sample. It is also desirable for the sample to be representative of the population. If the population of apples were 2/3 red and 1/3 green, the sample should be similarly split. Note that no matter what we do, there will always be sampling error or variation due to sampling, as we are looking at a part of the population, not the whole population. The video on variation covers these concepts more thoroughly. This video presents 5 methods of sampling: simple random sampling, convenience sampling, systematic sampling, cluster sampling, and stratified sampling. For each method, we will outline the process and the advantages and disadvantages. Simple random sample. Simple random sampling is theoretically the ideal method of sampling. You list each member of the population and use random numbers to decide which are in the sample. Each object is equally likely to be selected. This produces an unbiased sample, which we hope is representative. However, it can be difficult and expensive to take a simple random sample when dealing with people. Simple random sampling is more practical when the population is geographically concentrated and when a good sampling frame exists. A sampling frame is a list of all the people or objects in the population of interest. Simple random sampling can be more easily implemented for natural and manufacturing populations. Convenience sample. Convenience sampling is just that, convenient. You ask people nearby or people who walk past at a shopping mall. Or you take the next 20 objects off the production line. You do what is easy or convenient. Convenient samples are often biased in some way, but for a quick and cheap poll it may not really matter. Convenient samples can also have self-selection bias when people choose to participate because they have an interest in the issue in question. Systematic sampling. With systematic sampling, you choose a starting point at random and then systematically take objects at a certain number apart. For example, if there are 1,000 in the population and you want a sample of 50, you would take every 20th object. Systematic samples are easier to administer than simple random samples and are usually a good approximation of a random sample. However, if there is a pattern in the population, certain types of objects could be chosen more or less often than others. Cluster sampling. In cluster sampling, the population is divided into clusters which are then chosen at random. For example, departments of a business can be clusters, or suburbs within a city. Within each cluster, all of the objects are included in the sample. Cluster sampling can be more convenient and practical than simple random sampling. However, if the clusters are different from each other with regard to the elements we are measuring, it can lead to bias or non-representativeness. Stratified sampling. Stratified sampling seems like cluster sampling, but the strata or groups are chosen specifically to represent different characteristics within the population, such as ethnicity, location, age, or occupation. Within each group, a random sample is taken, sometimes in proportion to the size of the group. Stratified sampling can lead to a very good random representative sample. However, it can be complex to administer, and a sampling frame with considerable information about the population is required. There are other sampling methods. The 5 explained here give an idea of the advantages and disadvantages of various methods. You should attempt to use the sampling method that produces the best result for the resources you have available. If your sample has known bias, this should be taken into account in analysis and reporting.
Thank you. So we now have an idea when we carry out a primary research what sampling is, and it is important method to define what the correct sampling would be. Let's talk about instruments. For qualitative research, we would normally use interviews, which can be structured, something which you preset questions. Your interview questions are preset, and you interview just like a journalist is doing a structured interview with a respondent. Or you can organize a focus group, a small sample of people um, discussing the issue of your interest, discussing the ways how you are addressing your research question. So you are obtaining an information from discussions or perhaps even observations. In terms of quantitative research, you would probably need to look into questionnaires or surveys when you produce a comprehensive questionnaire and distribute. You will be distributing these questionnaires to your respondents. You can do it online or physically in person, or you can do it manually by distributing a piece of paper to your respondents to complete and tick boxes, and then you collect their handwritten completed um, questionnaires. Just a thought that think about anything else whilst I'm pausing for a minute. Let's now look into the action planning. Once you have formulated what your research aim and objectives are, once you formulated your research problem or research question, once you also have an idea what sort of research, qualitative or quantitative, you would like to carry out and what methods you're gonna do to collect and analyze your data, you need to construct a plan, effectively a proposal of your research. The plan would normally be in a form of a Gantt chart, which is a very useful tool which you might have probably used before. The Gantt charts represent your milestones, key task dates, review dates, any important periods of time to review and monitor the process of your research, the strategy of your research. Now that you have already come to the terms of the Gantt chart before, it may look as follows. So your research project starting from day one up to, let's say, 9 weeks, okay? You may wish on the left side to list the activities which you are to action within these 9 weeks. For example, you develop your research proposal this week, you obtain an approval from your supervisor, then you try and develop your test questions for your research, any test tools, talk to your participants. You are going to administer your research instruments, your questionnaire, for example, or survey. There are some milestone dates in terms of data collection and analysis, and then you are writing up your report at the very end of your research journey. The Gantt charts are very useful to define the times when you are gonna be very, very busy. So you can highlight that around these dates you're gonna be extremely busy as a number of activities, for example, developing tools, obtaining participants, and administering instruments and collecting data, all taking place pretty much at the same time. So the Gantt chart will help you to plan your time effectively. We are now going to look into the practical exercises, and I would like you to do some work. We are going to do it in what we call syndicate form, when we try to work in small groups. You may wish to look into this task and complete it on individual basis, but more importantly, what we're going to do is to formulate your research topic, question, and objectives. To do so, yes, you probably need about 40 minutes. You're going to use a poster, which will be a size of A3, something just like this. And you also need, or you can also look at it from the point of view of landscape. And you also need a pen, of course, so a marker. Once you brainstorm your ideas and you put on the poster, you can stick it to the wall and present your findings to the rest of your class or your fellow students or your family members if you're doing it individually, and look into the task. The task is as follows. So that you first need to identify a broad field or subject area of your interest. So you can put it at the very top of your poster. Try to look into sub areas, which you can which you can put underneath. For example, within HRM subject area, are you looking into training and development, or recruitment and selection, or performance appraisals, or something else? Circle the most interesting one for you, and try to raise the questions around it. Once you formulate your research question within this subject area, or sub-area rather, you try and formulate your objectives of your research and try to assess to what extent they are achievable. Try to think about these objectives in SMART terms. These are just some examples of any field or subject area which may represent an interest to you. Have a think about them. And you should go ahead and try and complete this work. I wish you luck, and in the next 40 minutes you are gonna look into this poster presentation and try and complete your work independently or with your colleagues. These are my references, which you may need to look into and read some of the sources in terms of how to carry out a comprehensive business research. At this point, I would like to wish you good luck, and once you complete your poster and have your plan in place, you please move on to learning outcome number 2. Thank you very much, and I am now disconnecting. Good luck.